important things. Anyway, so so today my plan was to discuss about especially direct methods and direct method. It's not necessarily we call it natural method, but somehow later on direct method and natural method. Mm, when direct method were questioned, so the linguists they came into picture and they adopted some of the linguistic principles you see, and so side by side this is the equivalent term, let's say direct method. In many books you will find that direct method or natural method, but it's not exactly direct method is not exactly natural method. Natural method, the emergence of natural method, it came little later, somewhere around 1970s or 1980s. People like Stephen Krashen, his theory and many theories were incorporated. Second language research, acquisition theories were incorporated, and then so it's a kind of mixed of direct method and natural method, So, but just try to understand that in many books, that's what I'm trying to make you aware about, that the linguistic terminology. In many cases, in many books, you may find that direct method is also called natural method. Yes, to some extent, but not necessarily. Natural method, somehow the principles later on, the linguistic principles were incorporated, okay, and later on in 1970s and 1980s. But direct method, somehow it was way started 1930s or prior to that, especially after the end of First World War, or prior to that as well, So direct method started, but natural method started after 1970s or 1980s, Anyway, so this is where so today mainly. So I'll be quick today since I don't have enough time, and I would like to complete this direct method within half an hour, so if time permits. Anyway, so direct method. Why this direct method? As I already told you, that direct method kind of grew out of kind of dissatisfaction related to the grammar translation method. So there are dissatisfaction. People are not satisfied, especially the learners who are not satisfied with the grammar translation method, you see. And the kind of key characteristics or features what we have already discussed today and even in the last class. So grammar translation method taught grammar and vocabulary through direct translations and focused on written language, and it's ignored spoken aspects. So what happened that after spending many years, especially you're learning the language, and let's say it's been more than 2 years or 3 years for that matter, and you're not able to speak, or even for that matter, writing is also not good, and the learners, they could not converse in the target language, So that was the problem, you see, and the main focus was, as you know, that it was mainly the language analysis or the grammatical level analysis. And the grammatical level analysis, try to understand that grammatical level analysis, and these are the grammatical level analysis because they have kind of prescribed textbooks. And mostly in the tradition grammar translation method, they have the prescribed textbooks, and those some of the rules which are out of context also. In English, there are many prescriptive rules. You understand that, I discussed those prescriptive rules, never end a sentence with a preposition. But in real day-to-day life, we have many rules, let's say, and we do use. But they're learning those rules, but maybe those rules are out of date, to some extent, you see. So, so mainly grammatical analysis, language analysis, and main focus was reading and writing, and it totally, completely ignored language as a kind of a communicative situations, language as a kind of a communicative situation. So the background of direct method, if you look at, and mainly in the late 19th century and somewhere in the early 20th century, and this time, if you try to look at the kind of population, the kind of target group, whoever were learning language in the grammar translation method, who are these people? Mainly many students, or maybe some intellectuals who would like to enjoy classical classical languages. Remember, the grammar translation method is also called classical method or oldest method or old method of language learning. So in that method, somewhere many people who wanted to enjoy those classical literature, whether the literature, whether it's in Russian or it's in English or it's in Sanskrit, so the kind of intellectuals, intellectuals kind of enjoyment and all, So the target group, especially now, later on, let's say somewhere in the late 19th century and in the 20th century, early 20th century, the target group have changed. The language learning populations for that matter, you see. So why is this case? Because if you look at the USA, the phenomena there itself in the USA, so many people started going to the USA. There are immigration into the USA. So many different nationalities, whether immigrants, different immigrants from different parts of the world, business people, tourists, and as a result, what happened? You have a new kind of classroom populations. Let's say, especially in the classroom, what happened? Let's say one person is from Bangladesh, another person is from India, another is from, let's say, from Sri Lanka, another is from Middle East countries, another is from, let's say, all these European countries and different European countries, let's say. And now the problem is the classroom. Earlier, what happened? Let's say you are teaching English through mother tongue. Now, if you're teaching English through mother tongue, and now the target, especially in the classroom, you have many mother tongues. So how to explain those things? And then the teachers, they do not know the mother tongues. Let's say if the classroom is of 10 people or 20 people. So which mother tongue to use? So grammar translation method is going to fail. Try to understand this, and you all understand. You are smart people, okay? So, so US is the kind of epicenter, and the immigration was taking place, and as you know that we talked about English and the kind of the growth of English, and especially in America, the kind of growing international trade and tourism. That time it was taking place, and so what happened? If you look at the transition, so in USA as well as in different European countries and other places, what happened? So there are kind of vocational language learning. You understand this vocational language learning. So vocational language learning, let's say there is an institute. And the institute is teaching the students, and not only students, the institute itself training the teachers as well, or a particular whichever the institute or employers for that matter, that they're training their employees to teach, to train in that particular language, and in that case English for that matter, or jobs, let's say. So the vocational language training already started in different places, and side by side there is another type of language learning. So there's a recreational language learning also taking place. Later on, you might have seen, I do not know whether you have seen that there is a serial Mind Your Language. Have you seen that Mind Your Language? Anyone? It's really interesting. You'll try to understand the direct. Huh?
It's a British comedy show.
Yeah, that's the comedy show. There's the Indian character, then Pakistani character. It's really interesting, and so it will tell you the whole direct method. How the direct method. One character is from, I think, Greek, Greece. I think he speaks Greek, and at least some characters are there, and it's really interesting to look at. And so how this direct method, and so the teacher, he has to. And not only that, there's a recent movie, I think English, even if you look at English, and that's also really interesting how Sridevi, she's learning English, and really interesting to look at. You see.
In French. It is in French. It was in
Sarah?
the movie, I mean, she was in French, or
Yeah. So there are many people from different countries, so okay, so really interesting English, even if you look at. So that's what I'm saying. So somehow the mother tongue, grammar translation method, which mother tongue, let's say, you're going to, let's say, instruct the students. So you have to take the target language for that matter. And the target language here, it is basically the English. So English was taken as a kind of a, so the vocational language learning program in different places, it was successful, and the people started learning language for their own benefit, let's say. There is a kind of recreational language learning. So you do not need any syllabus. People, they make effort, their own effort to learn their language, you see. So many people, not necessarily in the classroom, beyond the classroom. Let's say nowadays it is easy. So there are many courses, let's say it is free. Let's say BBC English learning. So you'll find that there are some courses, some materials, and also some access to internet. Those days, internet to some extent you do not have, but especially radio programs were also there. Many radio programs were there. So there is a kind of recreational language learning also is to take place also. So this way or that way. And so the kind of background, what you see, that I'm trying to give you the background of direct method, why direct method came into picture, So instruction is not possible in mother tongues, and whichever the mother tongue is, whether it is whichever the mother tongue for that matter, okay? And try to understand that because of this, that's the kind of global trend, and learners, they have different kind of need, different kinds of need. Earlier you have different kind of need, and now the learners, they have different kind of need, and the need has also changed. It's not only the written thing, now it has changed to, let's say, the spoken. Many people, they have gone to USA, immigrants and all. For them, it's like they have to speak, and and not only speak and write both. So they have to be competent or effectively communicate both in both ways, spoken as well as the written language, okay? And so as a result, language learning experts, so they advocated direct method. So language learning experts, so those days, especially in the late 19th century, I'm talking about. So language learning experts, so those days, those language learning experts, especially today, we call those language learning experts applied linguists. Those days, applied linguist, as you can understand that applied linguist, even it came very later, late to some after 1940s. So language learning experts were not called to some extent applied linguist, So whoever the language learning experts, not necessarily linguists, some language teachers, some educators, and some other people. So they advocated direct method. So the direct method of language teaching came into picture, okay? And so the main principle here, try to understand that the mother tongue was banished from the classroom. So mother tongue was banished from the classroom, and focus was on the target language. So whichever the target language, in this case, we are talking about English, and the focus was on the target language, is basically the English, okay? And here, the main focus was on development of oral skills, especially the spoken skills we are talking about, and an emphasis on the centrality of spoken language with native-like pronunciation as the goal. So you have to have native-like pronunciation. If it is American English, you have to speak English like, let's say, like an American. And the kind of techniques were involved. So earlier, what happened, if you remember in grammar translation method, so vocabulary, the words were introduced, and the words, isolated words, depending on, let's say, color terms, or let's say body parts or something, totally in isolation. So real life objects and other visual materials were the focus of teaching vocabulary. Visual materials at times, visual materials were presented. Let's say this is the tree. So they are showing that, yeah, this is the tree. Okay, so the concrete items were taught through demonstrations of objects through pictures. They are also showing pictures, whereas an abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas, especially. So vocabulary, if you try to, let's say, the real life, the kind of pictures and all, so there are many vocabulary for that matter. Let's say you can show through pictures. But there are many vocabulary abstractions and all, so it's very difficult You cannot draw picture for that matter. So they are teaching those things by association of ideas for that matter, you see. Um, and the grammar is taught. So earlier grammar were explained, let's say, in mother tongue. In grammar translation method, grammar were explained in mother tongue. Now they are not explaining grammar. So grammar is taught using inductive approach. So inductive approach is somehow you are trying to provide the data, whichever the data, and slowly and gradually the learners will learn the rules. That's what today we talked about, the inductive approach in the beginning, if you remember. So the data, let the students observe, let them hypothesize and try to find out which is the rule. And question answer pattern is central to this approach. Question and answer. So the teacher is going to ask questions, lots of questions to the student, so that they communicate, in the class. Question answer is the central to this method. So lots of questions, so that the interaction, interaction between students and teacher is continuous. So it's really interesting. If you look at more like earlier we had seen that grammar translation method, it's more like teacher oriented, but the focus here is the students. Let's say much more focus is given to the student. Okay, and so especially grammar direct method focuses more on action in the sense of demonstration instead of translation. So they action in the sense of demonstration. Even teachers will show that kind of action, in the sense demonstrate things, instead of translation. Earlier teacher was only translating from this language to that language, let's say, especially this to that, but here trying to show through action. And so the teachers, they believe that somehow more in explaining things by the way of act rather than explanation themselves. So acting or demonstration is more important than explanation. Okay, and it also advocates asking more questions to the learners, as I already told you, rather than the kind of monologue speech by teachers in the classroom. Earlier in grammar translation method, it was more like monologues by the teacher, like teacher-centric teacher, and there is no role of students so far. The students are mostly silent in the class, but here in this case, no, not necessarily. And correction was used as a tool of learning, not allowing mistakes. So if at the time of speaking, if the student or the learners, they make mistakes, so immediately the teacher will correct, and they'll not allow any mistake so to go any further. Okay, and if you're talking about the words, if you remember in grammar translation method, words were taught in isolation, and in this case they are not teaching words in isolation, but they are teaching words used in sentences and not those classical text. You remember, especially in grammar translation method, some sentences were taught, some paragraphs or passages were introduced from classical text, and the classical text you may not have importance, today in today's context, but they are trying to use the day-to-day living kind of context, and also using or teaching words, especially teaching words in sentences. Okay, and students are also asked to kind of make that kind of sentences. Okay. So it allowed more space for students in the classroom. As a result, it allowed more space for students in the classroom, and it gave more time for participation, for learning, more time, and on the other hand, if you look at it, gave less time to teachers. More time to students. So it's basically learner-centric or learner-oriented approach. Okay, and other thing, try to understand that this method, direct method, it discouraged prescribed textbooks. If there are any books which is prescribed, they kind of discourage prescribed textbooks and encourage the systematic lesson prepared or planned by the teachers. So instead of those prescribed textbooks, whichever the prescribed textbooks in grammar translation method teachers were using, so here they are not using those kind of prescribed textbooks. Rather the teachers, they are using some kind of their own lessons, let's say, and especially in this method, what happened? The teachers are advised to be patient also. Teachers will have to be patient in this approach, and so you have to understand that there are no miracles in the process of learning of language. So we all make mistakes for that matter. So if even the learner is making mistakes, one mistake, two mistakes, is okay. The teacher will have to be patient, because especially if you're talking about language learning, it's not a miracle. You have to like do your hard work, and then maybe you will learn the language. You see, so that's what teacher's role. Though it is not teacher centric, but student centric, but teacher will have to have lots of patience in this case. Okay, so so these are some of the features or the kind of principles of grammar translation method, as I told you. Okay, and there are many, let's say, somehow, as I already told you, the rules of grammar earlier, talking about the approach. Grammar translation method was taught in deductive approach, talking about the grammatical rules, and in this case it is inductive. So another interesting points, and oral communication skills were built up in carefully graded progression organized around question and answer exercises. So there is a kind of question and answer exercises, so student and teacher, there is question and answer is going on between student and teacher, and it's also some kind of exercises, some kind of text also, let's say. So one person and another person, let's say X is talking to Y, so the conversation is given there. Okay, so all that kind of things, and the emphasis was on pattern practice and drills for making the rules of agreement in language. Also, earlier we had seen that in grammar translation method, pattern practice and drills were there, but it was not so rigid for that matter. But you will find that use of pattern practice and drills are more in, especially in this case, in direct method. Lots of the kind of drills, and pattern practice, because their emphasis is on the spoken aspect. So you have to pronounce those words, or maybe memorize those sentences repeatedly. You need to pronounce those words as if like native-like pronunciation. So your pronunciation is not native-like, so the teacher will tell you repeat that thing, again and again, So there are, and even comprehension. You need to understand, even someone else is speaking, so you need to understand also. So listening, so speaking and listening comprehension were introduced, teaching for the purpose of understanding the target language. So both is interesting. Both is so speaking and listening. So it's not only speaking. If you are not a good listener, that's what some people say, that if you are not a good listener, you cannot be a good speaker as well. So you have to be a good listener. Okay. So, and accuracy in pronunciation and the use of well-formed grammatical sentences are also emphasized. So accuracy in pronunciation and use of well-formed grammatical sentences. So well-formed grammatical sentences. So this is one thing, accuracy in pronunciation as well as this. Okay. And now just briefly I'll tell you, and the grammar terms, especially this direct method. I don't know whether you have heard about this school. This is the whole school, and in many places in the world, in Europe, in America, in India, and different British colonies, So there is a Berlitz school, BERLITZ schools. So, and Berlitz schools, they have kind of slogans also, how to teach second language, and in this case English. So, and they have those slogans. I'll just simply read those slogans, and I'll tell you what are the slogans. So the slogans are as simple. So this is It says that never translate, demonstrate. Slogan 1, never explain, act. Never make a speech, ask questions. Never imitate mistakes, correct. Never speak with single words, use sentences. Never speak too much, make students speak much, as it is student centric. Never use the book, use your own lesson plan. Try to understand that. Never jump around, follow your plan. Whatever you have planned, follow your plan. Never go too fast, keep the pace of the student. Never speak too slowly, speak normally. Never speak too quickly, speak naturally. And never speak too loudly, speak naturally. Never be impatient, take it easy. So these are the kind of slogan of Balit School. And this Balit School, as I am telling you, it was in different parts of the globe, whether it's UK, whether it's in USA, and also in Britain, in India also. So these slogans were introduced, and all of the teachers, and I'll tell you what they used to do, Balit schools, they also kind of monitoring the teachers' microphones. What the teacher is saying, they're monitoring teachers' microphones. In case if the teacher is speaking in the student's mother tongue, so maybe that teacher may be fired from his job. So they are so kind of, arrogant in their approach, you see. And so one of the thing about whole this direct method and all, see, so what happened is Balit school also, they proposed the kind of the ideas, so they outlaw bilingualism. So outlaw bilingualism and imposed monolingualism. So the kind of one nation and one language policy we have already understood, discussed earlier. So if you talk about bilingualism is totally good to some extent, so if at times students are do not understand in the target language, so why not explain the thing in the mother tongue? But Balit schools, especially the people who are following staunch followers of this direct method, even the teacher, if he or she is speaking in mother tongue, student's mother tongue for that matter, so he'll be fired from his job. Can you understand that? So they are very, very staunch in their approach and all. So anyway, so this is somehow we looked at direct method and the kind of followers in different nook and corner of different countries, whether it's India or in UK or in USA. So even there are some kind of limitations of the direct method. You will see that there are lots of imitations of direct method. Okay, and so anyway, so today I think I don't have enough time. Anyway, just tell me. Let me just give you one or two limitations, and then maybe I'll just end this class. Okay. So now, if you talk about the kind of limitations of the direct method, so as we understand, so the key features, whatever we have discussed so far, can you just one of you tell me what could be the limitations of the direct method based on the key features or characteristics of direct methods?
I think it is solely focused on oral communication, so writing might be difficult for the students.
Yes.
Spelling errors or stuff like that.
Yes, Adya, that's true. And one maybe based on the things what we discussed so far.
Sir, for overpopulated, it may be little problematic.
Bunty, could you just repeat it?
Sir, for overpopulated class, it will be problem.
Yeah,
little problem.
Very, very, very interesting. You see, try to understand the size of the class. Now, let's say there are 30 students or 35 or 50 students in a class, and you have only 1 hour or 2 hours. And what will happen? You said that only question and answer, question and answer. So maybe the teacher is only interacting with only one student or two students, and rest of the students, they do not have any kind of exchanges between the teachers or between a student and a student. So overpopulated class, the size of the class, it does matter. So the direct method may not be helpful. Really interesting, that's Banti Kumar. Yeah, thank you for really talking about that limitation. Anyone else? Sumit, you raised your hand. Just quickly, Sumit. Don't take time.
Yes, yes, sir. Actually, in this type of method, it is very expensive because we use many types of teaching aids. So it's also very expensive, and it will be impossible to provide all the students in the rural areas.
Yeah, that's really, so, and other thing, try to understand that there are no prescribed textbooks, and the teacher will have to make his lesson plan and everything. You see, try to understand that the teacher, he's definitely a teacher, but there is no lesson plan. So the whole job, what to do, how to teach, and other thing is that try to understand. Other thing is that even the teacher at times, teachers are not, all the teachers are not good. Let's say whether even it's English for that matter. So even he is not a good teacher. That means the whole class is affected. And try to understand that. So whichever the English you are teaching, and in the global context, you are saying that you have to speak English like native, like whether it's American or British accent. And who is teaching English? Whether it's Indian or whether it's, let's say, in Sri Lanka, who are this either Americans or Britishers, they won't come there, let's say. So somehow there are lots of problems with this method, and not all teachers are proficient enough in this methodology, the methodology I was talking about, you see.
Sir,
Yes, so there is lots of yes, maybe one more
the
point.
amount of mistakes,
Sorry?
the amount of mistakes will be a lot, sir. So it'll be on teachers' patience.
That's
How-
what. Yes. The amount of mistakes would be, So there are lots of problems, and the false impression of acquiring native-like proficiency in speech, native-like proficiency in speech, and especially after we discussed about the puberty things and all, especially talking about the phonetics aspect, because your maturity, especially that vocal tract and all, the maturity has already taken place. If you remember this physiology of our vocal tracts and all, so it's not, maybe the children is easy to some extent to get this pronunciation and all. So anyway, so there are lots of limitations with this direct method and all. Okay, so later on, some of the limitations were overcome when linguists came into picture, and some of the things they introduced, some of the notions, as I told you, mainly Stephen Krashen, the input hypothesis, the kind of natural order things. So there are many things were taken into account from linguistic research, from second language acquisition research and all. So somehow the natural method of language teaching came into existence along with direct method. Okay, so please do read chapter 4. It is discussed in chapter 4, both direct method and natural language learning. So please do read. And so I think, so we do not have enough time today, so I'll end today's class, and tomorrow I'll meet you and also discuss about other language teaching methods and all. Okay.